the EU think they've managed to get back on track with the man because he allowed them to postpone the levies and taxes, tariffs from the 1st of June to the 9th of July. That's good of him.
That'll give you a whiplash, 50%, and then the next day and then the market craters, all of the world markets crater, and then he says, I'm going to put it off till July 9th, and then the markets bounce back up. The American markets have not bounced because yesterday was Memorial Day. So
yeah, they weren't. I realized they weren't running. So,
so we'll find out. I don't know where we are today.
I can have a quick look. Meanwhile, he said he had a very nice call with Ursula von der Leyen. Of course, he's not been very happy at all with the EU. He says that he believes the EU was set up to harm the Americas. So, yeah, you're all up today. Dow Jones 0.96, S&P 1.23, NASDAQ 1.91. Early doors, though.
That's a sandwich.
Early.
That's a little bit of a rise. We'll take that. But
yeah, so we seem to be back on at least speaking terms, and perhaps not 50%.
But the French seem to be irritated. The Germans seem to be really irritated by this because we see that the finance minister, Lars Klingbeil, said that he had spoken to Scott Besson about the matter. He says, we don't need any further provocations, but serious negotiations. The Germans seem kind of up to here with the nonsense that Trump has been pulling. And, the fact that most of the countries in the EU are allies of the U.S., it kind of makes almost as little sense as threatening the Canadians and the Mexicans. We're all friends, and I think that that's looking at kind of Pollyanna-ish, but I would think that they would reach some sort of
the idea, I suppose, for him, and a number of people will parrot this, that, by being this strong, he comes across as a strong man and a deal maker, and he has no problem about, going for 100% and then maybe backing it down to about 20, 30, maybe even 10. And he doesn't seem to feel that he loses any face when that happens.
No, he doesn't at all. And, the EU is one of the U.S.'s largest trading partners. They send $100 billion in goods, at least they did last year, and they bought $370 billion.
That's because the Mercedes, the Volkswagens, the BMWs are a little bit better than some of the American auto products.
A little bit better. And because for $600 billion, that's two cars. That's it. So, that's right. You drive one of those kinds of cars.
Got to go German. Well, why would you go anything else? Unless it's a 67 Mustang. I mean,
that is a great car.
Or a 57 Bel Air. And see, no, don't start me. Don't start me. I used to have a Delta 88,
A Delta?
Oldsmobile,
Man, that's a boat.
Wow, what a car that was.
That's a boat.
Blacked out glass and everything. We're going to sidetrack it into motors.
No. What kind of car did you drive when you were a kid? What was your first car?
Toyota.
A Toyota.
Yeah.
I had a 1971 Plymouth Duster.
Wow.
Real piece of crap.
What?
Real.
Oh, but looked fantastic.
It did. Real piece of crap.
Handles like a boat.
Lasted about 3 years. Done. In the trash heap.
Yeah, the Oldsmobile is the only American car I had. Well, I was living in Belize at the time, and so that was the thing to do.
Oh, you turned a few heads.
But the thing is, you couldn't get that back to UK. Can you imagine trying to park that in a parking space in Britain, or indeed in Valencia?
Well,
if you could even find a parking space in Valencia.
Every once in a while, I'll be walking down the street, and we'll see a Toyota pickup, a gigantic Toyota pickup, or a Ford pickup, which the most popular vehicle in America is a Ford F-150, and they're everywhere. They're completely ubiquitous. But every once in a while, we'll see one driving down the streets of Valencia, and we'll go, "Where are you going to park that, pal? That is a boat."
On top of everything else, generally. Yeah, they are big, and there's quite a lot of them in Spain these days, I noticed. Yes. So are we going to be paying more for these American cars if we buy them here, or do you think he's going to come down to a pretty decent deal?
Well, right now, we know that the auto dealers in the States are bracing for it, and like the local dealers have said that they think that the cost of cars could go up $10,000 to $20,000.
So that makes people buy American, which is what what they want, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you got to pay $20,000 more for a truck, these trucks, by the way, are going for $80,000, and I don't know anything about. I've never owned a truck, but I can tell you I wouldn't pay $80,000 for a truck, no matter, unless my job was that I was hauling a lot of stuff, which is not the case. But
so it's going to push up the price of local auto products as well.
Yeah, because if I own a local business and I need a new truck, I'm either going to hold on to the one that I've got. Finding one that's used, that's also going to be expensive. But to turn around and then buy a car or a truck for $80,000, that's going to be a huge dent in my bottom line. So I think that is going to be incredibly problematic. So more than anything, I hope they get the whole auto thing worked out, because that's where the biggest hits are. It's not the extra dollar you're going to pay or euro that you're going to pay for a 12-pack of eggs. It's things like cars and refrigerators and air conditioners and washing and washers and dryers.
Okay.
Yep.
On the world stage, we're there, we're not. We are, we aren't. Somebody says we are, and then we're not. We don't seem to be coming to any kind of conclusion with the war between Russia and Ukraine, despite Donald Trump's efforts, despite him saying that he would sort it out in 24 hours, despite Trump calling Putin crazy yesterday, and the response from Russia was that everybody gets a little emotional sometimes.
Well, you and I have been talking about this since I started almost a year and a half ago, and this has been a constant in every single show that we've done. But the fact is that Trump kept saying nice things about Putin. Putin was his friend. Putin, we can get a deal.
But then he lays in Zelensky always.
Yeah, and Zelensky's the problem. Now he's finally coming around to saying, Putin is crazy. Putin is the problem. He's the one in the middle of the deal. And everybody from France to Germany to Spain are looking, saying, we told you. You didn't know that.
You really think he's coming around? You really think those sanctions are coming? Because he's been very slow in this again.
Do I think that Putin's coming around?
No. Do I think Trump is coming around? Do you think he's going to actually go with those extra sanctions?
No, I don't know what he's going to do. I would love to act like an expert in this, but I really don't know. This is just an opinion. I don't think he's going to be coming around anytime soon. But I think that the pressure from allies and from people
from the Republicans though as well.
A lot of Republicans are looking at him going, this guy is no friend to the U.S. This guy is only out for himself, and he just wants domination of Russia on the world stage.
I mean, that's not changed. It's just that Trump was hoping, I think, to be another step along the road to a Nobel Peace Prize by being able to pull something together. But look at what's happened in the meantime.
Yeah, well,
there have been more bombs hitting Ukraine than there have since the start of the war over the past 3 to 4 days.
And he keeps talking about more sanctions, and I think that may be the thing. But I wonder, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, how many sanctions there are right now. I don't know how many things meaning the U.S., are buying from Russia. All the sanctions have got to be pretty well placed.
Well, I think it's with the sanctions that they're talking about now, and let's hope they come in pretty soon, are those countries that are buying oil from the shadow fleet and things like that.
That are doing business with them.
Yeah, sure. There are a number of countries that are doing that, like China and India, for instance.
Well, he's told people that this is a consideration, that there are going to be more sanctions, and he keeps trying to emulating Joe Biden a few ways, because Biden did a lot of these.
Well, I don't think he wants to end up like Joe Biden, supplying lots of military equipment for a big price, because that was one of the mainstays of his campaign, that he was going to stop doing that. So the alternative is find a way through to peace.
But I think everybody who looks at this from an EU side can say that
we told you.
And the more bombs they get and the more drones they get, the faster this thing is going to come to an end, with Ukraine on the high side of it. Otherwise, it is going to go on and on and on.
Well, certainly, Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, was just saying that in the last 24 hours, no more limits on the range that they can use, the missiles and the equipment that's being sent from the EU. That should be the same for the States. Whether Germany will give them the other missiles that they've been hankering for, I don't know. know. Of course, there is always a warning that any escalation could lead to something a lot worse. The words that come from Dmitry Peskov, for instance, the Kremlin's spokesperson.
But we also know that the MAGA people are very, very isolationist, and we know that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and J.D. Vance are whispering in Trump's ear that it has to be America first, that we're wasting too much time dealing with Ukraine, we're wasting too much money, and we ought to, I don't know if the phrase is walk away.
Well, appeasing Putin was just not the way to go about it, was it? You know?
Right.
Really
and so I just think that the chance of them walking away is always there. But, there are too many Americans, there are too many Republicans that want to stand with Ukraine, that want to see this thing come to an end with Ukraine victorious.
Well, that'll pass in the House then, won't it? If there are enough Republicans, surely the Democrats will back that.
Well, this bill that we're going to be talking about later for next year, the budget for next year is not does not have a lot of money in it for Ukraine, and so my thoughts are kind of dubious when it comes to how much support they're prepared.
Well, we know that a lot more money is being spent by the European allies. Yes. It's catch up at the moment. But if Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz follows through and finally gives Kyiv those Taurus missiles, then that will be a bit of a game changer. Certainly will. All right, sticking with the US, then Iran says it's ready to compromise with Trump and suggested that the US understands its red lines. This is all about the nuclear program.
Yeah. This is a little bit of good news. And, we've been kind of critical of the president in the past, but this is really good news that Iran is ready to compromise. The question is Iran like Putin?
Prevaricating.
Exactly.
Pushing the can down the road.
Exactly. Kicking the can down the road. And also, can Iran be trusted? And what happened
I think the word is no there, but...
Yeah. That's absolutely been true in the past, but you like to give someone the benefit of the doubt. Unfortunately, if you give them the benefit of the doubt and you turn out to be wrong, you could have a major catastrophe on your hands. But
yesterday, Trump was optimistic, though, was he not?
Yeah, and the whole thing is about nuclear, in that Iran wants to continue to they want to continue to use nuclear power to power their country, and the U.S. is
peaceful nuclear energy. They called it
peaceful nuclear energy, and the U.S. wants to make sure that nuclear energy is not being used for bombs or destruction or anything like that, because we know Iran is capable of that, and certainly the U.S. is more than capable of that. And so the problem is, how do you verify that?
I wonder how concerned Iran are also about the Israel threat as well, because that's part of the equation.
Yeah,
is it not?
It is.
If their existing facilities are destroyed, then they can't. That pushes them way back.
If they develop a bomb on the side and it can be used against Israel, or is eventually used against Israel, man, you are going to be looking heavily at a third world war on this. It's not going to be good. So the question is, how much leeway is there? Who's telling the truth, and who's going to blink first?
So Trump and his Memorial Day speech, it was all about him.
Everybody needs to know that when we start putting this show together, we really try not to have as many Trump stories as we do, but we just
even halfway through where we put our stuff together, we thought, okay, we're probably going to get away with some other stories here. It didn't happen.
I originally put together, I think, 15 or 16 stories. I sent it to Cal. Cal came back with 12 stories about Trump, and I go, he can't get away from this guy.
I was missing out the ones that you'd already told me about. So I know.
And I mean, he's like popcorn. He's everywhere.
Dominating at the moment. I was talking to our work experience Lexi earlier, and she approved of what we'd put together here. And she said,
really?
And she said, yeah, which was, I thought, that's quite nice that she did approve of the stories that we'd gone for, and
Good.
Then launched into a couple of Trump stories of her own and said, it's so difficult. He's all over everything.
There's so many good things.
Yeah. Right, yes. So, Memorial Day, what's it all about normally? It's not just about the president, is it?
No, it's not. He wants it about himself, but Memorial Day is celebrating the contributions of the soldiers who have died in action. Mm-hmm. And so, generally what happens is it's also a time where people are out there having picnics and they're opening up pools and everybody is out barbecuing and having a good time. And a lot of people go to the cemeteries and they plant flags on the graves of a lot of the soldiers. And, Arlington Cemetery is the most holy of grounds in the United States. I think I can go out there and say that 415,000 American soldiers are buried at Arlington, and if you ever go, and if any of you listening ever go to the U.S. and they go to Washington, make sure you go to Arlington. JFK is buried there, and Robert E. Lee, and all these very famous generals and not so famous people as well. But this is kind of hallowed ground, and it's traditional for the president to make a speech about soldiers and service and saluting all the people who
He did a bit of that. He did do a bit of that.
He did that. He did it for a couple of minutes, and then away we go. And
he wasn't sure how long he should be holding his salute either.
No.
He stopped, and then before the anthem, I'm like, I'm sure you have to know that the anthem's coming and you should still be saluting.
Well, he did a couple of things that were wrong when you come down to it, and I know you know this, and that is, number one, he wore that stupid red hat. He wore a cap during the whole time.
And he'd had a white one on the day before. I'm like,
he did. He did. It doesn't matter whether it's white or red. You
don't wear a hat.
You don't wear a cap, and when you're giving a speech in front of the flag, and it's an American tradition that when you see the flag, you take your cap off. You take your cap off and you put it over your heart, or even you just take it off. If you're at a baseball game and the national anthem is played and you keep your cap on, you will get the stink eye from everyone. And so, that's just common courtesy. You do that. And the second,
is it normal to take your hat off inside in America?
It should be.
But there's a broadcaster, there's a guy who comments on, I think CNN or I can't remember, MSN, and he always has his 10-gallon on, always, inside.
Oh, you mean like, like a cowboy hat?
Yeah, that's okay.
I mean like the baseball cap.
Yeah,
and
right,
it is my personal opinion, and maybe it's because I'm old-fashioned, I think you should never wear...
You wouldn't wear your hat inside. Don't wear your hat inside.
You never wear your cap
Never
inside.
put new shoes on the table.
Never. Your mother raised you right. My mother said the same thing. My mother, who is a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker, would say, and had a smoker's voice, she'd go, "Take your hat off. Don't wear your hat in the house." She goes, "You're going to go bald."
Excellent.
Which, didn't really happen. But okay. But, he the fact is he gave the speech, and he had some nice elements in the speech, and he started boasting about those young men could not possibly have known what's happening in the country now. A republic that I am fixing after a long and hard 4 years. That was a hard 4 years we just went through. Oh, boy, could you, beating up Joe Biden, beating up a guy who's not doing too well physically and emotionally right now, to me it's kind of a low blow. I don't know. So, but he brought up the borders. He said, people are pouring through our borders unchecked.
You brought up the judges.
Judges.
That was before, wasn't it? On his Truth Social.
Yeah, it's just a lot of things that he was griping about, and then you start bragging about the parade that's going to be thrown on June 19th for the Army's 250th anniversary, which happens to also be his birthday.
Of course, yeah.
And he said that's going to be bigger than the World Cup, bigger than the Olympics. They're going to have the World Cup this year.
They're both coming up in the States, aren't they?
Yeah, the World Cup in, I think, 26 and the Olympics in 28.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's all going to be happening under his purview. But anyhow, the fact is that he seemed to take some swipes where he didn't need to take swipes and just be presidential.
He likes to big himself up at any opportunity.
Yeah.
You know that.
Well, he did the same thing at West Point the previous day, and he went off on a tangent about trophy wives, and which had nothing to do with him.
Where did that come from, anyway?
I don't know. He started talking about a guy named William Levitt, and I must tell you something, that William Levitt created a prefab town, the first prefab town in America, called Levittown, which is my hometown. It's a city I was born and raised in. I wasn't born there, but I was raised in Levittown. So I'm wondering why he's picking on this guy. Levitt's been dead for at least 50 years. So I don't know why they're picking on that. So he also, he was accused of lying after the event, and he said the biggest problem seems to be, and I think a lot of people out there have read it, that after he gave this this speech, he said that he had to go because the tradition is that the commander-in-chief, because it's only 1,000 students, that he stays and he shakes the hand of every single person graduating. It's a great tradition. I'm not sure it happens at Annapolis, but it does happen at West Point. And he said he had to go and deal with Russia and China. A lot of people question whether or not he really did have to leave early, and it turns out he boarded his helicopter and went to play golf.
Well, that's what he generally does, play golf.
Yeah, but so he lied to all these cadets, and he lied to everybody in attendance, and I'm sure the people who out there who like him and who tolerate him say, hey, it's no big deal. But, to the students who were there and the parents, kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Where else do we go from there? We've got time to talk about the names and countries of all international students at Harvard. Why on earth would he want those? ICE.
Well, he's convinced everybody that he's really picking on Harvard, but in a way he's picking on a lot of the higher end schools, the Ivy League schools, the Big Ten schools, the larger, more stable, well-known institutions that he wants names and countries of where all these kids. And if I'm the president of Harvard, I'd say, go jump. I'm not going to give you the names of all these students. I mean,
she's been pretty hard at resisting him, I thought, of all of his requests and what he's been saying so far.
Well, they have admitted, the president of Harvard has admitted that they have done a lot of, the school has tolerated a lot of anti-Semitic stuff. They freely admit that there has been a lot of stuff. But whether or not they rise to the occasion of a lawsuit or students being turned in or deported, I don't think so. That's my opinion.
But the judge who has been involved here has sided with the school against Trump, effectively, saying that, they were basically suing the administration, weren't they, Harvard?
Yeah, and the judge was
appointed by Obama,
was
right?
appointed by Obama, yeah. Her name is Allison Burroughs, and she ruled that the university, the oldest and wealthiest college in the country, they filed suit on Friday, and Harvard argued that the revocation of its certification of the student visitor program was retaliation, which it clearly is. I mean, he's got a real bug up his butt about Harvard, and he's about liberal institutions that have a lot of protests, like Columbia, like Yale, and so consequently, he's looking to get rid of many of these people. The problem is he's borderline breaking law and doing this, and it really does reek of what happened in Germany in the 30s.
Depends what judge you get. I
it
guess.
does, but it to me it reeks of going door to door and saying who's in that.
Well, his beef is that the federal government provides money to Harvard,
and they do, but most of this money is done for research. I mean, a lot of research for COVID, for cancer, they come out of the Centers for Disease Control. They come out of a lot of different areas. A lot of research, medical research, comes out of universities, comes out of Harvard and Yale and University of Michigan and places like that.
So he's worried basically about these institutions because that's where a lot of social movements and protests that end up changing things in the States start on these campuses.
And you know what? And they did that in the 70s, and they did it in the 80s and the 90s, and they're going to continue.
So that's what he's worried about.
I mean, when I was in college, it was during the Vietnam War, and I'm telling you, we had protests all over campus all the time, and there were rocks thrown at police, and there were bottles thrown, and stuff like that is going to happen. I'm not saying they should be tolerated, but there is, you got a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds on a campus, and they all feel passionately about something. Stuff is going to happen, and there's nothing you can do.
But his intention is to stop, basically, them enrolling international students, which the judge wouldn't back, but also stop the funding, right?
Yeah, but one of the questions I have is, are the international students the one causing the problems? I think if they look up, and I think really where he's targeting is he's targeting Palestinian students, anybody with a Middle Eastern background, because that's what is
Well,
that's the dog whistle.
Obviously, was at the beginning, following the Hamas attacks and the subsequent war, there was a lot of noise and generated from that area. But of course, there are other things that they stand for too.
Yeah. Absolutely true, but and we've been covering this and following this for a long time, and it did kind of start at Columbia University and a couple other higher end universities, and there was a lot of nastiness going on in the Palestinian and Israeli situation. But pulling funding from a university is hardly the way to do it. Now, the total endowment at Harvard, by the way, is $92 billion. That's an estimate. That's a lot of money.
It really is.
That's a lot of money they have in their back pocket. So is $3 billion going to hurt them? It sure is. But they'll manage to figure that out. But this whole idea of constant lawsuits between them and the government to get this right, this is going to go on. I hate to say it, for another 3.5 years. I don't see this going away anytime soon.
Our U.S. correspondent Rich Reynolds with us then. Where do we get to? Top Republicans threatening to block Trump's big, beautiful spending bill if national debt is not reduced. Are we starting to see some fight back then in the Republican Party?
Yeah, but I don't know if it's necessarily in a good way, because what happened is the way the American system works is that it gets voted on by the House of Representatives first, in which it passed by one vote, 214 to 213. So it was right on the edge, and they were claiming victory. Now the Senate gets the same bill. The Senate gets the bill, and then they have to vote on it. But the senators, Republican senators right now, have said that they don't think there are enough cuts in there, because what happened is, without getting into the bowels of this bill, that it added, I think, $4 trillion to the debt. I mean, there's a tax cut in there, mainly for wealthy people, which, let's face it, they do not need. And now the Senate's getting it. And the Senate has said a lot of the what are called budget hawks are saying they need to make more cuts. And so what happens is the Senate's going to get it. They're going to make their changes, and they're going to make some cuts. Where they're going to make cuts, I don't know. Hopefully it's not to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. Those are
or to SNAP.
Or to SNAP. And if they do, even if they make one change to that bill.
Which is food stamps, we should reiterate.
Correct, it is food stamps. And if they make one change to the bill, it goes back to the House.
So you end up with
and it's going to be voted on again. And then the House is going to either make a change or they're going to approve it, and then it's going to go back. You have to remember that the Senate, because it only has 100 members to it, is the more senior thing. They've got a lot more clout than the Congress. There are people in the Congress I don't even know. I know most of the names of most of the senators, but not the congressmen. But this thing could ping pong back and forth, and Trump is, despite the fact that he said that cutting Medicare and Medicaid is a non-starter, they went ahead and did it. So. We'll see what happens.
That's a MAGA policy, isn't it?
Well, it kind of is, but he's really against it. And I have to tell you, he is backed by so many people who are older. And Medicaid is people who are poor and who need some assistance. And so in this particular case, the one thing you have to remember is Trump's a lame duck. He can't run again. So it doesn't matter.
We keep hearing.
These people cannot vote for him again. The person they are hurting probably is J.D. Vance. Wherever this happens. So you need to keep the name J.D. Vance in your brain.
You really think J.D. Vance is the next Republican candidate?
I do think either he or Marco Rubio, but I think he's got enough of a following.
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Marco Rubio. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, he's already tried a couple times, and so we don't know where this is going to go. But the first time he tried, he was not Secretary of State. I think it's going to be between those two guys. You had a guy named Ron DeSantis, who is the governor of Florida.
Indeed, yeah.
He's kind of disappeared, and he's kind of upset a lot of people.
Yeah, okay.
Who are in Florida. But anyhow,
we're getting ahead of ourselves.
We're getting ahead of ourselves. So in other words, the bottom line is
rose-tinted glasses about the future.
I know. Hopefully I'm still with you guys and still coming in on Tuesdays.
Stop saying that.
But this budget is going to be ping-ponging back and forth, could be for another 6 months.
Okay. Now, the confrontation with Cyril Ramaphosa in the Oval Office really centred on this white farmers in South Africa story.
It is. I don't know if you want to set the table on this thing, but a lot of people know that the president of South Africa came into the Oval Office and just to say hello and greet the president. And I don't think the president of South Africa, except for Mandela, they don't exactly visit Washington a lot. It's at the end of the day, it's kind of a smallish kind of country. But in this particular case,
Trump got one of his aides to play the video.
He set him up,
which was actually it's a false video.
It's a completely false video, and the BBC and other outlets they fact-checked it. That's the word I was looking for. They fact-checked it and found out there were all kinds of things. There, the crosses. Apparently, there were crosses on grave sites of white farmers, and it turns out that among white farmers in the country, they are a very, very small percentage of farmers at all. And it turns out that
those crosses were not marking graves.
They were not marking. They were memorials to people who had died. So that was not a cemetery. And these people had not been murdered. Now, that being said, the fact is that South Africa is one of the most violent countries on earth. There's no question about that. Last year, 26,232 people were murdered. And I'm not sure exactly what the population of South Africa is, but it's smallish.
Yeah, but of those, 44 people were killings of people within the farming community. 8 were farmers. So what was happening in the Oval Office was being blown out of all proportion, and what was being said was absolutely false.
Yeah, but when Trump was confronted with he saw these photos. He didn't have his own people fact check this. He charged right in to, let's just say, to humiliate the president of South Africa, but he didn't take the bait. I mean, he was entirely classy and dignified and just said, look, you got your information wrong, bub. And
in February, a South African judge dismissed the idea of genocide as clearly imagined and not real. The figures that we just mentioned there. Trump was also playing footage from political rallies where people were singing "Kill the Boer."
Yeah, and it turns out that indeed they were saying "Kill the Boer."
It's an anti-apartheid song.
Anti-apartheid song. But the fact is that was a minority people, and the guy who was singing it and leading the singing is kind of a rabble-rouser, and the president explained that. He goes, yeah.
Julius Malema, who read he used to run the ANC's youth wing.
Yeah, so they looked at him and go, well, yeah, this guy was doing it, and he's a troublemaker, but that doesn't mean anything. Look at all the people singing songs in around Europe and in the U.S. It's all going to happen. So.
And also, there was the Democratic of Congo when he held up that piece of paper saying, "Look, there are burial sites all over the place. There are all white farmers that are being buried." But it wasn't actually South Africa that was holding up, and it was a report about women being killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So even the leader of the free world can get confused on the internet.
But as
I'm being nice there.
I know, but
he should know better, and these people should know better.
They should, and you and I were talking off mic saying that Trump he didn't apologize. He didn't say I was wrong. I got the wrong information.
I don't think does he ever say I was wrong?
Never, not once. And he just doubled down and said, "Well, that's the information I have. That's what people are saying."
All right, we spent too much time on the Trump again, as usual. We have to wrap, I'm afraid.
We got to talk about Billy.
We are. What is the condition that Billy Joel's been diagnosed with? He's had to cancel the rest of his summer concerts. This is the man who famously sang at your prom.
He did, with his group, The Hassles, in 1969. But anyhow, he canceled all his tour. He's got, as a lot of you may have read, he's got a brain disease called hydrocephalus, which means he's got liquid on the brain. But it is treatable. It's very rare. But I imagine from everything I've read that his the liquid has to be removed, and it causes him to lose balance and to forget things, and it's pretty serious stuff. But it is very, very rare. Only like 0.2% of people get this sort of thing. He is 76 years old, so they have to be kind of careful about this sort of thing. But
the doctors were praising him for going public on this because they said it could help others because it's quite difficult to diagnose or the symptoms are easy to miss, I think is what they said.
Yeah, but he did, if I remember correctly, last concert he had, there was some video of him falling off the stage. Yeah. I mean, he really took a bad spill. So that probably was one of the clues God knows what was happening at home.
Well, we wish that a very swift and full recovery to Billy Joel. But by going public, he's bringing awareness for people who might be suffering from a similar condition. All right, we got to go, Rich.
Adios.
Thank you very much.
See you next week.